I have Derek Borman, a longtime friend of ours. He's been an MVP and soon to be another round of award status. I can at least say that, Derek. You now attained MVP status again, so congratulations. But we have Derek, and he's going to be talking about the difference between what is a Canvas app and what is a model app. And the frame of reference for most of you who are still trying to get up to speed on what is a Power App, Dynamics is powered by Power Apps. And when we say that, when you're looking at Dynamics, all the capabilities that you see on the form and in the layout, everything that you see is all powered by our Power Apps platform. And so Derek's going to go into a little bit of differences of what you would expect from a Canvas side and what you would expect from the model side. So Derek, how you doing?
I'm very good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right here on Monday. It's sunny here in Seattle for once.
Yeah, I was there for 2 weeks and it wasn't sunny at all the entire time I was there. It's a little disappointing, actually.
I know we have a week of it, but we'll have you out here at some point or another, if not the MVP Summit, hopefully.
Absolutely. So, is my screen showing up okay?
Absolutely clear.
Excellent. So first of all, thanks for having me, everybody. As Pervin mentioned, my name is Derek Borman, and I do a lot of Dynamics-related training events, kind of all over the U.S. and all over the globe, and specifically related to more of the first-party apps. Things around like sales and customer service and field service. But obviously, with the Power Platform and the changes that have been coming, I've been getting a lot of Power Platform events. So do a lot of Power Platform boot camps and those kind of things. And one of the questions we get a lot is around what is the difference between like a Canvas app and a model-driven app. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to sit down and just kind of walk through, what is the difference? More importantly, when are you going to use one? Why are they important in each of their individual aspects? So we'll go ahead and kind of talk through that. Before we do that, I just want to go through and just kind of review the Common Data Service and the CDS real quick. And then we'll do a little bit of a Canvas versus model comparison. And then we'll talk more about kind of leveraging both of them together as part of a solution. And so when we first kind of talk about, model and Canvas apps and Power Platform, I guess one of the key things that you always have to remember or talk about is the common data model. And there's a lot of questions around the common data model, and I'm sure Pervin's probably got a common data model presentation planned at some point in time as well. But the essence of the common data model is that it is a common set of entities that can be utilized across individual applications. And so if you look at this kind of example, we have a core set of entities that come with the common data model. And then as you add different elements, maybe you're getting Dynamics 365, or maybe you're bringing in some third-party solutions or creating your own custom web application. As you create and add entities, you're adding entities that are on top of the common set of entities that are already there. So for example, the common data model comes with the account entity, the contact entity, email, so on and so forth. If you go out and buy Dynamics 365 for sales, what you're doing is you're adding entities on top of that. So you're adding the opportunity entity, maybe the invoice entity, so on and so forth. And same thing as you go through. And the reason why that's important is if you think about how to build custom applications, a lot of your applications are going to be sitting on top of this common data model or using the common data service to build applications that facilitate that. And so this is really built off of the old XRM framework for those of you who are coming from a Dynamics perspective, where we actually have kind of that centralized repository where we can build applications on top of that common data service or those entities as we're coming through. And so again, that's just a quick high-level overview. The reason why it's important is a lot of your applications are going to sit on top of this common data service or use this common data service to facilitate, maybe potentially integration across applications, or to have a centralized application that's going to give you kind of the best of both worlds. And so how does this really pertain to what it is that we're talking about when we talk about model apps, and why does it really matter to Dynamics 365? So kind of as Pervin mentioned when we first came in here, Dynamics 365, if you look at it as it exists, is really a model-driven app. All of our first-party apps, whether it's sales, customer service, or field service, are built using the Power Platform set of tools and really can be considered model-driven apps. They're just model-driven apps that already have some specific functionality that have been built and utilized in those individual situations. So when you start talking about as an implementer, or you start talking about somebody who's going to deploy Dynamics, you're deploying our core first-party model-driven app. And then on top of that, you're going to go in and create or perform customizations or configurations or create applications that are going to supplement that individual behavior that's going to go beyond what is just your out-of-the-box sales functionality. Maybe I need to add a loan processing situation. And so what's nice about the Power Platform and the concept of model-driven apps is I don't necessarily have to customize Dynamics 365 to fit my needs. I can build applications on top of the CDS that already fit my needs, and then I can supplement those with kind of Dynamics 365 applications. And what's nice about this is I can now utilize this information across applications. So rather than kind of diving into this and going through, let's get to why we're here, and let's talk about this a little bit more. So first and foremost, let's start with this. What types of apps are there? So we've got Canvas apps and we've got model-driven apps. And the question we always get is what is the difference? So what I always tell people is think of your Canvas apps as a traditional application that is going to have a much more defined user experience. It's going to be more screen focused, and it's typically going to be more task orientated. And what's nice about Canvas apps, if you're truly talking about them from a Power Platform perspective, is Canvas apps also have the ability to connect to multiple data connectors. And so I might have a Canvas app that not only talks to the common data service, but I also have a Canvas app that's maybe talking to SharePoint, or it's talking to Office, or it's talking to maybe an external application like Slack or something similar to that. A model-driven app takes your data model or your database, in this case the CDS, and it builds an application that is going to look very similar. So all model-driven apps have a very similar look and feel that basically includes business processes, relationships, and automated procedures that can now mimic what it is that you're trying to do from an application standpoint. And so when we start talking about Canvas versus model, here's kind of how I typically simplify this, particularly for people who are coming from a Dynamics background. If we think of sales or service as a true model-driven app, which means it's sitting on top of the database functionality, it is delivering a very set piece of functionality. It's providing them the ability to do sales, it's providing them the ability to do service or field service. If I needed to supplement that, maybe for example, I needed to have one of my service technicians when they're out on site, I needed them to be able to take pictures, or I needed them to be able to go out and catalog specific pieces of inventory that are taking place while they're out on site. A typical model-driven app isn't going to give you that capability. So that's where I can supplement that with a Canvas app. So I could build a Canvas app that maybe has a barcode scanner, or maybe it just takes pictures, but it now goes out and it actually supplements the functionality by performing a specific business use case that the model-driven app itself wouldn't necessarily be able to do. Let me give you kind of another example of this. So one of the scenarios that we talk about with model versus Canvas apps is building it for specific industries. So I'm going to just exit out of here real quick, and I'm going to open up a specific application. So just give me one sec here. So if you think about how you might be looking at this from a Dynamics perspective, let me go to one more area here real quick. So for those of you who are kind of new to the game, this admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com, this is where I have access to all of my different environments that I'm working with. And so if I have multiple organizations, maybe like a test environment or a production environment, this is where I have access to all those environments. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up one of the environments that I have. And when I first open this environment up, one of the things that you're going to notice is it's going to take me to kind of a loading screen. And so within this loading screen, it's going out and it's asking me what specific types of applications I want to be able to open. And I can see here that I have my traditional dynamic sales hub, sales hub, customer service hub, but I also have one called real estate. And so this is a model-driven app that I created that is specifically targeted at the real estate industry. And so if I go ahead and I open this real estate industry app, you can see that I have my model app. It pops up. It looks very similar to the first-party Dynamics 365 apps, but what's different in this situation is I'm only exposing the specific database entities that are sitting in the common data service that I need in order to facilitate this particular item. And so it's giving me things like contacts and property listings and showings and open houses. And so, for example, if I come over here and I click on property listings, this is now showing me all of the different property listings that we have inside this particular item. So I can see, think of this as maybe like a back end scenario. So I'm sitting at the office, I'm getting new properties that are coming in, and now I'm going in and I'm adding these properties to the application. And so, for example, if I click on this 5-bedroom golf course item, I can see specifics around this particular property. I can see where it is located. I can see the physical address. I can see when it was listed. I can even see asking price. And as people have come in and started to perform specific elements on this, I can actually see if there was anything happening on this particular item as well. One of the things that I can see over here is I can see that we have open houses and we have showings. And so I can come over into this related area and I can see when this open house was scheduled. And if I click on this open house, I can dive deeper into it and see when the specific open house was scheduled, who owned that open house. And then if I want to, I can actually look at the showings that were defined with this. And so all this is doing with the model-driven app is this is giving me the capabilities to dive deeper into each one of these individual scenarios. So this lets me go in and actually modify or see the details that are coming in it. So think of a model-driven app specifically as connecting to your data and providing you with a streamlined interface that has business processes, forms, views that you can architect the way that you want to work with. Now, this is great if I'm looking at this from a back office scenario, but let's think about this more from somebody who's going out in the field. So let's say that I'm a real estate agent and I've contacted somebody or somebody's contacted me and now they want to go ahead and have me list their property, or maybe I'm showing people houses and they want to be able to see the houses, or we want to be able to look at houses so we can decide what to show them next. So what I can do in here is I can actually come back over to my Power Platform area, and I have created a model-driven app. So I'm going to go into another area here just so you can see kind of back end on where everything was created. But I have another app that I have created that in this case is a Canvas app. And so what this Canvas app is actually now doing is it's targeted functionality. So what it's doing is it's going out and it's allowing me to actually go through, and while I'm sitting on site, I can have all of these property listings directly defined right in here. So think of an agent as using this out in the field with a tablet. They can browse through and they can see what specific properties they want to work with. As they click on these individual properties, they can see specific information, so they can interface and show this information directly to the customer as they're sitting out and going through that information. If I hit add, I can come in here and I can actually add a new property directly from this scenario, streamlining the process and maybe allowing me to define how many bedrooms this has or other items. But what this is doing is this is providing functionality that a typical model-driven app is not necessarily going to provide you. It is a much more dynamic interface, it is a much more customizable interface, and it's a much more visual appealing interface. The other aspect of this is also allowing us to talk to or be a part of multiple data sources that could connect to this one individual application. And so the reason I wanted to show you this is sometimes it's a little bit easier to see side by side why you might use one over another. But let's take a step back here a little bit. So let's go back into our PowerPoint. And let's talk a little bit about where are you starting. So here's some of the core kind of technical or fundamental differences. Typically, a Canvas app is not going to be CDS data driven. So a Canvas app is something that I could go ahead and I could connect to CDS if I wanted to, but I could connect to SharePoint, I could connect to third-party applications, I could connect to any application that has a piece of function or has a connector available to it. A Canvas app is also very often going to be either task focused or maybe a single screen. So it's going to be something like you see here, where it is allowing us to supplement our application behavior by creating real estate properties or viewing properties directly from within that Canvas app. It's typically something that is going to have a much more defined interface. It's typically going to have a very custom user experience associated with it, and it's typically going to allow you to work on different types of devices and have a much more dynamic experience. A model-driven app, on the other hand, is always CDS data-driven. So it's always back-ended by the CDS, and it's typically going to be very back office or process focused. So I'm building an application that is maybe going to guide my real estate people through the process of achieving a new listing, scheduling the open house, and now working through the point where we're ready to receive the offer from the customer or from the person we're showing it to, and now go through the paperwork scenario. So it's typically something that has a very specific process that you want to utilize within that situation. It typically has a very consistent UI. So one screen isn't going to look that different as you move across from one area to another area. It also gives you the ability to personalize and lock down what data people have access to based upon different security roles that they have within their organization. And it gives you the ability to go out and define kind of the data relationship and that information. So easiest way to define this is think of model-driven apps as database-driven, coming off of CDS, and you're building the screens and the processes that are going to support that. And think of Canvas apps as much more task or single screen driven that are typically going to complement overall functionality that you might have across that. So that's kind of at a high level, the major difference between model driven and Canvas apps. So we saw kind of an example, but let's revisit this maybe a little bit more and talk a little bit more specifically about what you want to think about. So first and foremost, when you start talking about model-driven apps, you really need to kind of understand or decide what is the intent of what it is that you're trying to do. So is this an application that is going to be used for real estate management? Is this an application that is going to be used for loan processing? And what specific tasks will they be doing in this application? Do we need them to go out and process loan applications? If we are processing loan applications, who should have the ability to process that, and what information should we be able to capture from those particular items? So when you're starting to build a model-driven app, you really need to start thinking about, at a database level, what data you need to capture and how that data will be impacted. Then one of the key elements that you need to think about when you're working with model-driven apps is who's going to have access to it. What are they going to be doing? Should they only see opportunities, or should they only see property listings that they're the listing agent for, or should they be able to see all listing properties regardless of who has access to or whoever owns that particular situation? Being able to determine and modify security within the context of the application goes a long way in helping people kind of get started. And then you need to think about, what information should be included? What entities do I need? What forms? What business processes? How will the information or the application be tailored based upon what I need? And would there be any other applications that might be impacted based upon those individual situations? And let me explain that just a little bit further. So if I come back into my application here that we talked about earlier, this is very much defined or looking at specifically just real estate functionality. But now think about if I was an application or I was a company that maybe did loan processing. So maybe once we actually have this particular item or this property, if we have a particular client who hasn't necessarily decided on a lending company yet, maybe I could convert this opportunity or this item into a lending opportunity. And now maybe I have another application, which is my lending application, that now allows me to go out and be able to utilize information from other areas. And so one of the things you want to think about when you're getting ready to build these model-driven apps is, are there other pieces of functionality or are there other applications that might need this functionality to be utilized when you're working through it? So let's kind of experiment with this a little bit. So I'm going to go into my Power Apps and I'm going to create a new application, and I'm going to create a model-driven application. And so before we go too far into this, let's dive just a little bit deeper. So I'm going to first go into data, and I'm going to go into entities. And this is going to show me all of the entities that are currently sitting in this CDS. And so these are all of the items that I'm available to talk to and to utilize and connect to as part of this model-driven app, or even to a certain degree a Canvas app if I wanted to. If I come in here, for example, and I click on the account entity, and I come over and I drill into it, I can see that for the account entity, these are all the fields that are currently sitting in this table or this entity that is being utilized for the account entity. Additionally, I can see all of the relationships that this account entity has with other tables or other entities inside the application. I can see what are called business rules, which are automation rules that I can use for kind of like client-side scripting that can be applied to model-driven apps to provide kind of a real-time interaction point for customers who are working with the application. But I can also see views, so I can see any views that are being used to populate data or display data in the application. I can see any forms that are being used to create or interact or interface with, as well as dashboards and charts and other information that are related to this entity. So one of the first things to remember is, regardless of if you're going to be doing, a Canvas app or if you're going to be doing a model app, it all starts with the entity that you want to use in CDS and building the relationships in the fields. When you start talking about model-driven apps, when we come into here and we click on forms or we click on views, we are now starting to look at the items that are going to be displayed inside that model app. So if I wanted to have a very specific form that displayed, individual account information, this is where I would come in and modify this form. And now this form is available for me to leverage whenever I'm going out and going to include it in model apps. These forms have absolutely nothing to do with Canvas apps. Same thing with views. The views and those items, they don't have anything to do with Canvas apps. Everything that we're talking about at this point is really specific to model-driven, and you can see that as you come in and click on some of these individual elements, is it tells you specifically as you go into them that they are model-driven pieces of functionality. And so forms, views, charts, dashboards, think of those specifically as model-driven functionality. So when you're getting ready to build an application, now when you come over here and you click on your application and you say, I want to create a new model-driven app, now you come in and define what specific elements you want to include. So in this case, I'm just going to call this sample app. And I'm not going to get too technical. I could go in and I could, upload and change images and I could do all that. But for right now, we'll just go ahead and hit done. The first thing that you're going to see in here is I need to define how people are going to navigate through this application. So I need to define a sitemap. And if we come back to this model-driven app here, I'm really talking about this area here. So when somebody comes in and opens up this real estate app or whatever this is going to be, what information do they have the ability to move through or access over here? And so this is where I can now come in as part of this app designer and I can modify the sitemap and I can now start to define what I'm working with. So the area, think of the area as the app, and then think of the new group as the grouping. So this whole thing here would be the real estate app or real estate area. And then within the real estate area, I would have the grouping. So my work, clients, listing management. If I added multiple areas down here, I would be able to switch. So maybe I have one that is real estate, and then maybe I have one that is like settings and modifications that has more of specific settings. So what you're going to do when you come into here is you're going to modify your heading. So I'm just going to call this real estate. And then I'll click on my group, and maybe I'll call this listing management. And then I'll come in here and I'll say that I want this to be an entity. It's going to be a property listing entity. And within this listing entity, now I can define what items I want to work through. So now I would come over here, add maybe another sub area. And in this situation, maybe I'm going to call this also an entity, and I'm going to call this open houses. And so this now lets me connect to existing entities that I have in the application. So what you're doing with a model-driven app is you're looking at the core database entities, you're looking at the forms, you're looking at the fields, and you're architecting a user experience with that model-driven app that now allows somebody to navigate through that application very effectively and very efficiently. Whereas with a Canvas app, you are creating a screen or a use case scenario that now allows people to go through and create or accomplish a very specific task. So they're two very different design experiences, but they complement each other greatly. So one of the things that I kind of always tell people too, as we kind of go through this, is try to separate yourself a little bit from the whole Canvas versus model-driven app. It's important to understand what the difference is. So Canvas apps are, task oriented. They're very visual, custom UIs. Model-driven apps are off of your database. They're very business process focused. They have security and those kind of things. So there is a difference, but they also complement each other very well. Like we saw in the situation here with the real estate app. I was not able to get the visual experience that I wanted to have with a Canvas app or with a model-driven app. So by creating a Canvas app and utilizing that, I've now created an overall business solution that is now available for the customer to utilize. And so I try to really not necessarily, when we're talking about this, really limit them to Canvas or classify them as Canvas or model. They are apps. And it's just a matter of what specific app do you need? Do you need one that's going to connect to your database and supplement that functionality, in which case you're going to base it off of a model app off of your CDS? Do you need a task to be able to supplement some specific functionality? In that case, now you're going to go ahead and you're going to use a Canvas app. And the nice thing about Canvas apps is Canvas apps can be embedded in other applications. So maybe you want to have a Canvas app that is now embedded in a Power BI report. And so now you have a situation where everybody talks about, actionable analytics. If I have a Canvas app that's sitting inside a Power BI report, I can now, as I'm interacting with that Power BI data, I can actually go out and see or interact with that Canvas app directly from the Power BI data source. Or I also have the ability to take this Canvas app, so to speak, and I can actually go out and let me show you another area here. I can embed this Canvas app for specific functionality in Dynamics or in a model-driven app. So here, instead of just having a subgrid that says, here's all your different contacts that you have, this is actually a Canvas app that is sitting inside a model-driven app that is fully interactable. So not only do I have a much more visual reference to be able to see these individual people and work with them, but in addition, I also have the ability to now interact with this form. So as I come in and I click on specific elements, it'll actually start navigating to different areas of the form. Let me give you one kind of example of that here. So as you come over into here, you can see that as I click on something like add contact, it can now interface and open up the quick create form. And so what you're doing here is you're creating a dynamic and seamless experience that is combining both model and canvas apps into a singular scenario. They're each serving their purpose, where model is coming off of the data and canvas is now using that application specific functionality that allows us to have a more deeper interaction with the contexts that are showing up. And so as we go through this, I always like to tell people, really think about what is your best option here. Is it a combination of model, or is it and canvas, or is it truly using them together to build a custom solution that the customer needs? Now, I went through a lot of information. Pervin, if you're still there, what questions do you have, or is there anybody in the audience that has any questions, or is there any areas that you would like to maybe see me go a little deeper into?
No, I think that covers a lot of the basic things. And for those of the people that are on the call, certainly post your questions in the Q&A section, and we'll run through those as they come in. The big thing that I just wanted the rest of the world to kind of understand is, from the experience, if you came from the dynamic side in getting the Power Apps experience, it's a little bit exciting to people that they can kind of move away from the standard form design that they've been locked into for a long time, and they can insert in and move things around with a little bit more ability to add in, as you can show, all sorts of cool add-ins that are components. The piece that I want to also kind of cover too, and you kind of touched upon it, is you can have a mixed experience where Canvas and model exist on the same model-driven form. So that way, if you wanted to create your own mini Canvas app that's embedded into the form, you can actually put that together. And that can be a component, that can be in its own app. There's a couple of different ways to surface that, but that's where the uniqueness comes in, where a lot of people have given us feedback over the years saying, I just wish there was just better ways for us to manage the white space that you might see on a form. And that gives people a lot more capability and flexibility to lump in as much as they want to.
And I think that's the big thing, is white space has always been a problem, particularly if you're coming from kind of the dynamics aspect of it. It's always been, how do we supplement with subgrids, or how do we fill in this information or remove stuff to really make it show off? And we don't necessarily have to worry about that as much now that we are moving over into this Power Platform based model driven canvas scenario. Because with model driven apps, like we showed you here, obviously I can bring in the canvas app and I can supplement the white space with that. But now with these model driven apps, what sometimes people don't realize is I can add some visual elements to this. So for example, if I have like a credit limit field, and I don't want that to just like this annual revenue up here, if I don't want that to just say $10,000, maybe I want that to be a slider. So now if I have somebody who's accessing this particular application on a tablet or a phone, it's a little hard sometimes to click in there and facilitate that. So we have a bunch of visual control elements that we can now bring into these applications that now not only do they fill in the white space, so to speak, but they provide this very dynamic visual element to what it is that you want to do with these standpoints. And so by being able to create a canvas app or a model driven app, and to be able to take this functionality and utilize it seamlessly together, it is now creating that overall end-to-end business solution that lets you truly see kind of what's happening. Let me see if I've got one more example that I can show you here real quick. I'm going to get out of here.
And while you're tabbing through that, we do have one question. Question came in: can you embed a model-driven app into Dynamics Finance and Operations?
No. So as of right now, model-driven apps you cannot embed into F&O. However, you can embed Canvas apps into F&O. And so if that Canvas app is sitting and is tied to CDS, which is where your model-driven app would be looking at, you now could take that Canvas app, embedded into F&O, and now utilize that information that would be pulling some of that information from Dynamics or whatever that situation is, or that model-driven app sitting on CDS, into finance and operations. So, but that's where the component aspect comes into play, because once you create that Canvas app, all of the data that's in that CDS, you would now have the ability to surface in that Canvas app, as long as you have that one common denominator that you can pass through from finance and operations, that's truly going to identify that record in the application. So now you have that seamless experience with the Canvas app. So that's the one thing with model apps, is to remember, model apps, you don't necessarily have the ability to embed them in other applications, but you can create Canvas apps and you can embed those Canvas apps in other applications, and those Canvas apps can talk to the same data source, in this case CDS, that any model-driven app would be built off of.
Correct. And I've responded to, so it is possible to do for a Canvas app, and I'm going to preface this right here, but you can't do it with a model app yet. And that yet is something that's on our radar, that we want to make sure that people understand that, yes, we are looking at making it uniform across all of our applications. Whether you might be coming from the finance and operations side of things or the customer engagement side of things, but we're looking to make this a app experience that's uniform across the board.
Well, and I think that's the other thing, and that's part of the reason that when I was first kind of going through and talking about stuff, I mentioned, don't think of them necessarily as Canvas and model apps, because they really are just picking the right application or component per se, maybe is even another way to say that, for the use case that you're looking with. And as we move forward with this and we start having more, parity and more scenarios, you're going to start to see those lines get a little bit more blurred, and it's going to be really just be, what component do you need to deliver the business functionality, not necessarily Canvas versus model. So and that's why I always tell people, think about them as different tools in the tool belt. What do you need to surface for the customer? Do you need a more dynamic experience that can talk to multiple data sources, or do you need something that's more process driven? So, one of the things that is the other kind of advantage to this is, here's another example that I have of a Power BI report that is actually talking to model-driven apps or talking to a Canvas app. So here I have a Canvas app that's actually embedded inside a Power BI data source. And this is one I did for a training class, so I apologize if it's not the prettiest thing you've ever seen. But what you can do is, as you're coming in and selecting on some of these different elements, you'll notice that the Power app, let me get you in a different screen here so you can actually see it.
Sure.
There we go.
Calendar.
There we go. Sorry about that. So if I come back over here, so this is actually just one that I did for a training class, but as you can see, it's Power BI report. It's got some visual elements in it, but it's got a couple of rough, Power Canvas apps associated with it. But these are tied to this Power BI data source. So as I come in and interact with different elements in here, you can see that what is being displayed inside these Canvas apps are actually changing. And so now, since Canvas apps also have connectors to other applications and can execute things like Microsoft Flow, now think about actually truly being able to deliver a true actionable analytic situation to your customer. They drill in, they find the specific opportunity that they want to, they click on that particular opportunity, and then there's a button in there that now goes out and generates a task or does something that feeds that information into, in this case, the CDS or maybe SharePoint or some third-party application. But all of that now can be triggered as people are interacting and drilling into this. And these Power BI scenarios, I can actually embed Power BI, dashboards and stuff inside model-driven apps. So now I could be in a model app, have this information exposed in the model app, interact with it, drill into it through the Power BI dashboard, and now fire off the task from that Canvas app, all without ever having to leave that overall experience. And that's where Canvas apps can really help supplement what people want to do, because they give you access to your cameras. They give you access to being able to filter across data sources. They give you the access to have a much more visually compelling story that you can bring in and offset some of those other different scenarios. And so that's where a lot of this is moving forward. And that's, again, why I kind of sound like a broken record, but don't think of them as, think of them as what tool you need in what situation.
Absolutely, and you definitely get the the kudos for the day for showing how you could actually access information to CDS, but not even be in a model app. That's the piece that I think a lot of people are just wrapping their heads around. Is the old world, if you came from the dynamic side, you were forced into a interface that you had to live and breathe in. And now we've created the ability for you to be able to create not only rich reporting, but be able to then access that data, action upon that data, and then you could even automate that data as you have that button there to generate the task. So these are all services that are existing within the Power platform overall that you have access to as part of being a Dynamics customer, or just simply just using the model experience and creating your own app outside of Dynamics.
Absolutely, and yet that's the other thing I tell people is, you know, don't be afraid to think about, how might I just build this app for a customer? If it's doesn't necessarily need the Dynamics for Sales functionality or the Dynamics, customer service functionality or field service functionality, it might be something that you can just build on CDS and have that same type of experience. Now, by all means, if you need to support a sales process, or if you want to do something like, omni-channel functionality for service, we've already gone to the links in our first-party apps to build that functionality in. So it's much easier to just bring those applications in and then plug and play the functionality that you need, and then offset it with some, custom Canvas apps, or maybe some additional entities that, or a streamlined model-driven app. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the first-party apps. It can be just, here's my business scenario that I need. I spin up a CDS instance. I create the model-driven app functionality that supports that business methodology on whatever it might be, and it's a targeted, custom-built business application. And that's really the advantage of the Power Platform, and that's why it's so exciting, because truly people have the ability now to architect very robust, visually appealing business applications with very little or no code. And you don't need a lot of experience. I mean, if you're a model person, if you're somebody coming from Dynamics, it takes a little bit to get the hang of the screens and the Canvas apps and stuff like that. But once you get the hang of how to, execute and do the functionality, it's very streamlined. It's very easy. And what I've noticed is a lot of people who are coming from like SharePoint, who might be more of your traditional app designers, they pick up the Canvas app concept very quickly. It's the model-driven thing that takes a little bit of time, because they're not used to orchestrating a business application that is necessarily has business processes facilitating through that. And so we're at this interesting time where we've got kind of two worlds colliding. We've got the very visual application designers that are coming from the Canvas stuff, and we've got the biz apps people that are used to building business applications. But this one platform lets us build both very dynamic business applications that are visually appealing and allow you to truly streamline your business processes across multiple line of business applications. That was my marketing spiel. Sorry about that.
No. Awesomeness. I think a lot of people are just now wrapping their heads around all of this. They're going, it's almost intimidating, to be honest.
It is. The first couple of times you come in here, and we see that, a lot of times when we do it in class too. I spend the first hour kind of going through that scenario that we just kind of did, where we walk them through, okay, let's build a model app for this specific reason, so you can start to see the big picture and how all these little puzzle pieces can start to fit together to build that solution. And I think, the first time you come in there, there's just so much data, it's hard to ingest. Like, people don't even necessarily know what data is true and what data isn't true. There's a lot of misconceptions too. The one I hear all the time is that CDS and Dynamics are completely different. One has their own database versus the other, and that is completely incorrect. I mean, Dynamics is built on the CDS, which is leveraging the Power Platform. So CDS is the Dynamics database for any of you that are coming from a Dynamics standpoint. So then all of the core customization things that you're used to doing in Dynamics first-party applications still apply and are still how you're going to do it today. It's maybe just a little bit different interface. We have a new look, we have new customization tools and designers, but at the core, you're still creating entities the same way, you're still building forms the same way. It's still those same Dynamics practices that you've been doing for the last 10 to 15 years, depending upon how long you've been doing it.
Awesomeness. Well, we're rapidly approaching the 11 o'clock mark. I know we started late. Did you have anything else to cover?
I don't, but if you guys are interested, I mean, if this was something that was helpful, like I said, I got all sorts of stuff. We could show you how to build some of this stuff if you wanted to. There's all sorts of
We will
options. So.
certainly have you back on. Definitely more from Derek. But before we wrap up here, how do we get in touch with you, or how does the world get in touch with you once they see this video and obviously want to ask you questions?
So probably the easiest way is obviously I'm on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn/Derek Borman. I will give me a couple seconds here as we're done, and I'll put all my contact information up. But my email and LinkedIn are probably the two best ways. Also, I'll put up a link for my CRM tip of the day, which is my YouTube channel that I put a lot of different videos out, and we have a few topics on some of these different things as well. So as we put those out, we try to update those on a fairly regular basis. The next one should be coming out here in the next couple of weeks, but I'll put the contact information out. Completely forgot to put that on there initially, so I'll put that all on here, and feel free to reach out via LinkedIn, email, or any way that you need to. So I'd be happy to help.